Hello everybody, welcome back. We are back already with Halo Contact Harvest. We're on Chapter 3. Let's get right into it. Chapter 3, Covenant Missionary Allotment near Epsilon Indi System, 23rd Age of Doubt. Staring at the aliens' vessels, stacked containers of ripe fruit, Dadab began to salivate. He rarely saw such delicacies, let alone got a chance to eat them. In the Covenant, the union of species to which Dedab belonged, his kind, the Ungoi, ranked low in the pecking order. They were used to scrambling for scraps, but they were not alone. Near the base of one of the stacks, 3 Kigyar were squabbling over a jumble of particularly juicy melons. Based. Dabab tried to trundle past the screeching reptilian creatures unnoticed, even though he held the rank of deacon on the Kigyar's ship. Minor transgression. He was an unwelcome addition to its crew. Under the best of circumstances, the two species were uneasy allies. But after a long voyage with dwindling supplies, had they not happened upon the alien vessel when they did, Dadab had only half humorously feared the Kigyar might have made a meal of him instead. A melon wedge tumbled through the air and hit the side of Dadab's blue-gray head with a syrupy thwack, spraying juice on his orange tunic. Like the rest of his body, the Ungoi's head was covered with a stiff exoskeleton, and the blow didn't hurt him in the least. But the 3 Kigyar erupted in shrill laughter all the same. "An offering for his holiness," one of them sneered through the dagger-sharp teeth. This was Zar, the leader of the crewmen's little clique. Easily differentiated from the other two by the length and deep pink color of the long, flexible spines that crested the back of his narrow skull. Without breaking stride, Dadab loosed a powerful snort, dislodging bits of rind that had lodged in one of the circular vents of a mask that covered his pug nose and wide mouth. Unlike the Kigyar, who were quite comfortable in the oxygen-rich environment of the alien vessels, Ungoi breathed methane. The gas filled a pyramidal tank on I hate this guy's name, Dadab's back, and flowed to his mask via hoses integrated into the tank's shoulder harness. More melons sailed Dadab's way, but he was past the Kigyar now, and he ignored the sticky projectiles that slapped against his tank. Annoyed by his disinterest, the throwers returned to their petty squabble. Minor transgression was part of the Covenant Ministry of Tranquility's vast fleet of missionary vessels, ships responsible for exploring the boundaries of Covenant-controlled space. Deacon was the lowest ministry rank, but it was also the only position open to Dadab's species, one of the few jobs Ungoi could get that didn't involve hard manual labor or risking their lives in battle. Not any Ungoi could qualify for a deaconship, and Dadab had made the cut because he was smarter than most, better able to understand the Covenant's holy writs and help explain these laws to others. The Covenant wasn't just a political and military alliance. It was a religious union in which all its members pledged loyalty to its supreme theocratic leaders, the prophets, and their belief in the transcendent potential of ancient technology, relics left behind by a vanished race of aliens known as the Forerunners. Finding these scattered bits of technology was the reason minor transgression was out in the deep black, hundreds of cycles from the nearest Covenant habitat. As deacon, it was Dadab's responsibility to make sure the Kigyar followed all applicable writs as they went about their search. Unfortunately, ever since they'd boarded the alien vessel, the crewmen had been anything but obedient. Muttering inside his mask, Dadab trundled down a row of containers. Some of them were clawed open, and he had to leap over slopes of half-chewed fruit the Kigyar had left in their rush to sample all the vessel's delicacies. Dadab doubted any of the containers held items to interest of the prophets, but as deacon, he was still supposed to supervise the search, at least offer a blessing, especially when it involved items belonging to aliens as of yet known to the Covenant. As focused as the prophets were on finding relics, they were always eager to add new adherents to their faith, and although that task was technically the Ministry of Conversion's responsibility, Dadab was the only religious official present, and he wanted to make sure he followed all the relevant procedures. For the deacon knew a good performance now might guarantee a promotion later, and he desperately wanted off minor transgression, and onto a posting where he wasn't just responsible for keeping tabs on irreverent bipedal reptiles. More than anything else, the deacon wanted to preach, to someday become a spiritual leader for Ungoi less fortunate than himself. It was a lofty goal, but like most true believers, Dadab's faith was buoyed by ample amounts of hope. At the end of the row of containers was a mechanical lift that rose up the side of the hull. Dadab stepped onto the lift and considered its controls. Raising one of its two spiny forearms, he thumped a button that seemed to indicate up, then grumbled happily as the lift rattled up the wall. A narrow passage led from the top of the lift to the vessel's ruined propulsion unit. Dadab caught a whiff of something foul, and stepping squeamishly through a bulkhead door, he disabled his mask's olfactory membranes. The pile of fibrous mucus in the center of the cabin beyond was instantly recognizable. This was where the Kig-Yar had chosen to defecate. Gingerly, Dadab slid one of his flat, four-toed feet through the sticky results of the Kig-Yar's fruit-fueled gorging until he struck something metallic. The small box that had attempted to converse with Minor Transgression's communication circuits. Finding the alien vessel had been pure luck. The Kig-Yar ship had just happened to be between jumps, conducting one of its scheduled scans for relics, when it detected a burst of radiation less than a cycle from its position. At first, the Kig-Yar's leader, a female ship mistress named Truryar, had thought they might be under attack. But when they drew closer to the vessel, even Dadab could see it had simply suffered from some sort of drive failure. Still, Truryar had wanted to make sure they were in no danger, unleashing a full barrage with Minor Transgression's point lasers. She had fried the vessel's drive, then sent Zar aboard to silence the box, make sure it could no longer cry for help. Dadab feared Zar would be too aggressive and ruin the one item of salvage that might help his promotion off the Kig-Yar ship. But he could never admit this to Truryar. He had known of many other Ungoi deacons who'd have met with unfortunate accidents for similar disloyal acts. Eventually, the ship mistress had given him permission to collect the box. Dadab assumed because she, too, had realized the importance of the item to the Ministry of Conversion's work. She could have gone herself, of course, but as Dadab watched the excrement slide off the box onto his hands, he realized Truryar had probably sent him because she knew exactly what the box's collection would require. Holding his stinking prize at arm's length, the deacon retreated back down the passage. After evading another barrage from the Kig-Yar in the hold, he scampered through an umbilical back onto Minor Transgression. He hurried into the ship's methane suite, the only room constantly filled with the gas, and eagerly undid the chest buckles of his harness as he backed into a triangular depression in one of the square room's walls. A hidden compressor sputtered and began to refill his tank. Dadab slipped out of his harness and swung his oversized forearm across his chest. His jaw ached from his mask's tight seal, and he tore it off and flung it away. But before the mask hit the floor, it was intercepted by a lightning-fast pearlescent swipe. Floating in the center of the suite was a Huragok, a creature with a stooped head and elongated snout held aloft by a collection of translucent pink sacs filled with a variety of gases. 4 interior limbs sprouted from its spine, tentacles to be exact, one of which held Dadab's mask. The Huragok brought the mask close to a row of dark, round sensory nodes along its snout, and gave it a thorough inspection. Then it flexed 2 of its tentacles in a quick, inquisitive gesture. Dadab contorted the digits of one of his hardened hands so they matched the default arrangement of the Huragok's limbs. 4 fingertips facing straight out of the deacon's chest. No damage. I tired. Where? His fingers splayed and contracted, bent and overlapped as they formed each word's unique pose. The Huragok released a disappointed bleat from a sphincter-like valve in one of its sacs. The emission propelled it past Dadab to the tank receptacle where it hung the mask on a hook that protruded from the wall. "Did you find the device?" the Huragok asked. Turning back to Dadab, the deacon held up the box, and the Huragok's tentacles trembled with excitement. "May I touch what I can see?" "Touch, yes. Smell, no," Dadab replied. But the Huragok either didn't mind the box's residual Kig-Yar stench, or it simply failed to get Dadab's joke. It wrapped a tentacle around the alien plunder and eagerly lifted it to its snout. Dadab flopped onto a cushioned pallet near the suite's freestanding food dispenser. He uncoiled a nipple connected to a spool of flexible tubing, put it in his mouth, and began to suck. Soon, an unappetizing but nutritious sludge surged down the tube and into his gullet. He watched the Huragok pour over the alien box, its sac swelling and deflating in an expression of what? Impatience? It had taken the deacon most of the voyage to grasp the creature's sign language. He could only guess as the emotional subtleties of its bladder speak. Indeed, it had taken him many cycles just to learn the Huragok's name, Lighter Than Some. Dadab knew the basics of Huragok reproduction, or rather Huragok creation. The creatures manufactured their offspring out of readily available organic materials with the same deft activity of their tentacle cilia, which Lighter Than Some was using to bore a neat hole in the alien box. It was a truly fantastic process, but what Dadab had found most unusual was the most difficult step for Huragok parents was to make their creations perfectly buoyant, to fill them with the exact right mix of gases. As a result, new Huragok would initially float or sink, and their parents would name them accordingly. Far too heavy, easy to adjust, Lighter Than Some. Clamping the nipple in his teeth, Dadab inhaled through his nose. Swelling his lungs to capacity, the methane in the suite was no less stale than what he carried on his back, but it felt good to breathe unencumbered. As he watched Lighter Than Some insert his tentacle into the box and cautiously probe its interior, Dadab was once again reminded of how much he appreciated the creature's company. There had been multiple Huragok on the training voyages he'd taken during his education at the ministry seminary, but they had kept to themselves, and had been singularly focused on keeping their ships in good working order. This is why Dadab had been more than a little surprised when Lighter Than Some had first flexed its limbs in his direction. Repeated a single pose over and over until the Ongoy realized it was attempting a simple hello. Suddenly, Lighter Than Some jerked its tentacles from the box, drew back as if shocked. The Huragok's sacs swelled, and it began flailing its limbs in spastic discourse. Dadab struggled to keep up. "Intelligence, coordinates, undoubtedly the aliens, even more than our own." "Stop," Dadab interrupted, spitting out the food nipple and jumping to his feet. "Repeat." With visible effort, the Huragok forced its tentacles to curl more slowly, Dadab watching with darting eyes. Eventually, he grasped Lighter Than Some's meaning. "You certain?" "Yes, the ship mistress must be told." Minor Transgression was not a large ship, and in the same amount of time it took Dadab to refit his tank, doing his best not to wrinkle his tunic, he and the Huragok were out of the suite and down Minor Transgression's single central passage to the bridge. "Either remove your mask," the ship mistress said after Dadab breathlessly delivered Lighter Than Some's assessment, "or learn to speak more clearly." Churyar was perched on an elevated command chair. Her light yellow skin made her the brightest thing on the small, shadowy bridge. Dadab swallowed twice to try to clear some residual sludge from his throat and began again. "The device is a collection of circuits similar to the processing pathways running throughout our ship." "My ship," Churyar interjected. Dadab winced. "Yes, of course." Not for the first time, he wished the shipmaster shared Czar's spiny plumage. The appendages changed color depending on the male of the species' mood. Right now, the deacon was desperate to gauge the level of Churyar's impatience, but like all female Kig-Yar, the back of the shipmistress' head was covered with dark brown calluses. Thick skin, like a patchwork of bruises that made her narrow shoulders seem even more hunched than they really were. Dadab decided to play it safe and cut to the chase. "The box is some sort of navigational device. and although it is damaged, the deacon gestured furtively at the Huragok, who bobbed to a wall-mount control panel, it still remembers its point of origin. Lighter than some drummed the tips of its tentacles against the panel's luminous switches. Soon, a three-dimensional holographic representation of the volume of space around minor transgression coalesced in a hollow tank before Chiryar's chair. The tank was merely the space between two dark glass lenses, one built into a platinum pedestal, the other embedded into the bridge's ceiling. Like most surfaces on the Kigyar's ship, the ceiling was covered with a purple metal sheeting that, catch the hologram's light, displayed a darker hexagonal pattern, an underlying beryllium grid. We were here, Dadab began as a red triangle representing the Kigyar ship appeared in the projection. When we registered the alien's vessel's radiation leak, as he continued, the projection, controlled by Lighter Than Some, shifted and zoomed, presenting additional icons as required. This is where we made contact, and this is where your Huragok believes the vessel initiated its journey. The ship mistress angled one of her globose, ruby-red eyes at the highlighted system. It was outside the missionary allotment the ministry had charged her with patrolling, beyond the boundary of Covenant space. Though Chiryar knew it was heresy to suggest such a limit, the prophets believed the Forerunners once had dominion over the entire galaxy, so every system was hallowed ground, a potential repository of important relics. And its destination? Chiryar asked, her long tongue rattling against the top of her beak-like mouth. Again, the deacon signed to the Huragok. The creature bleated from its sacs and flicked two of its limbs. I'm afraid that data has been lost, Dadab replied. The ship mistress curled her claws around the arms of her chair. She hated that the envoy had learned the Huragok's language, that the deacon now served as intermediary between her and a member of her crew. Not for the first time, she considered losing the deacon out of an airlock. But staring at the unexplored system, she realized the pious little gas sucker had suddenly become a great deal more useful. Have I ever told you how much I appreciate your good counsel? The ship mistress asked, relaxing into her chair. What do you suggest we tell the ministry? Dadab's harness began to chafe around his neck. He fought back the urge to scratch. As in all matters, I will follow the shipmistress's recommendation. Dadab chose his words very carefully. It wasn't often Chiryar asked him a question, and she had never asked for his opinion. I am here to serve, and in so doing, the will of the prophets, honor the will of the prophets. Perhaps we should wait to make our report until we have had a chance to survey the alien system. Chiryar mused. Give the Holy Ones as much information as we can. I am sure the ministry would appreciate the shipmistress's desire to bear more complete witness to this important discovery. Dadab hadn't said approve, but if the female Kigyar wanted to take her ship out of the allotment, Dadab couldn't stop her. She was, after all, shipmistress. But the deacon had another, more personal reason for his compliance. If they did find something of value in the unexplored system, he knew this would only help speed his promotion, and to accomplish that, Dadab was willing to bend a few rules. After all, he thought communication delays happen all the time. An excellent recommendation. Chiryar's tongue flicked between her jagged teeth. I will set a new course. Then, with a cursory flip of her head, may we follow in their footsteps, and so better mind the path. The deacon answered, completing the benediction. The saying honored the Forerunners' divination the moment they activated their 7 mysterious halo rings and disappeared from the galaxy, leaving none of their kind behind. Indeed, this belief that one could become a god by following in the Forerunners' footsteps was the crux of the Covenant religion. One day, the prophets had long promised their faithful hordes, we shall find the holy rings, discover the very means of the Forerunners' transcendence. Dadab and billions of his Covenant believed this absolutely. The deacon backed away from his shipmistress's command chair, signaling lighter than some to follow. He pivoted as smartly as his methane tank could allow, then trotted through the bridge's automatic sliding door. Zealot, the shipmistress hissed at the two angled halves of the door as the door Jesus Christ. The shipmistress hissed as the two angled halves of the door slid shut. She tapped a holographic switch in the arm of her chair that controlled the ship's signal gear. Return at once. Bring only what you can carry. But shipmistress, Czar's voice crackled from her chair. All this food would... Return to your stations, Chiryar screeched, her patience exhausted on the deacon. Leave it all behind. The shipmistress gave the switch an angry smack. Then, with a rasp of her tongue, only she could hear, soon we will find much, much more. Chapter 4. We're flying through this one already, man. Oh, it's a good book. I love reading the Halo books. Got a lot to read, and I like that. It's going to be a sad day when we finish them all. But that day ain't today, and that day ain't soon, brother. I tell you what. Anyway, please like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.